Welcome to the deep dive into the Bulwark class for Space Marine 2. This overview will cover every facet of the class as it pertains to operations mode. Everything from weapons, the class perk tree, its class ability, tactics for gameplay, best practices, some pros and cons, and some overall recommendations for operations mode. Bulwark is your standard sword and board fighter, with a couple ranged options for when the flying enemies attack. The most important part of the Bulwark class to master is the special ability, the chapter banner. Not only does it boost your armor, but once you unlock the ability for it, you can heal teammates and yourself completely. You can also instantly resurrect a teammate. Unfortunately, the banner doesn't start with the healing ability or resurrection ability. You have to unlock it through your character perk tree. This also means that your character perk tree is kind of pointless when it comes to editing your banner abilities in the gear section. In higher difficulties, people expect you to heal them and yourself with the banner, so if you choose another set of perks other than Invigorating Icon and Rejuvenating Effect, people may get upset or at the very least play like they are counting on you to keep them alive. Due to the way this is designed, the class really only has one character perk setup when it comes to the gear section. I do want to note that the 6.0 patch dropped while I was recording the content for this video, so I went back and played about 14 more rounds on lethal difficulty, trying some weapon mixes and just some general combat flow. Nothing seemed to be that different from before the patch, but I do feel like lethal mode has gotten a little less difficult. The introduction of the Biovore does take some getting used to, and I had to figure out its hit patterns and behaviors. With that in mind, let's get into the first part of how you interact with the enemies of the game, your weapons. I'll start with the melee weapons, since that is the most impactful system to how you play. First, the Chainsword. I have to admit, since this class really forces you to stick to melee, the block version of the Chainsword stood out as the most devastating one of the three you can choose from. With a 4 speed and 16 plus damage, you are cutting down swaths of enemies with ease. I don't miss the parry mechanic at all with this setup. The main reason I don't recommend the block Chainsword on the other classes is because your main weapon is your ranged weapon, and the parry mechanic of the Chainsword is utilized to recover armor, set up gun strikes, and just give you a moment of invulnerability to survey the field for your next target. Not that you can't play that way with this one as well, but it's just a little different. The fencing version is about as fast, but much weaker, whereas the balanced version is incredibly slow, but has similar damage. As far as the perk tree goes, I went with the Stomp build to keep enemies off me as I move around. Let's take a look at that perk tree. Alright, for the Chainsword, as I said, I've actually been going with the block version, which is weird. I have not liked this, especially before the patch. I don't know if they changed much at all, but in contrast to having a ranged weapon, if you are forced to utilize melee as your primary way of combat, I can't think of anything better out of all of the stuff that you have than this. Sometimes the sword in the speed mode is a lot more fun, and its cleaving potential is somewhat there, but overall, yeah, this has been the most fun, the most successful. It's the one that got me the highest kill counts in lethal mode. It works. I don't miss the parry function at all. I am really shocked. Obviously, if you look up here, your strength, 16 plus. Yeah, there's nothing in here. There's nothing in here that gets remotely close to that for any of the other weapons. 16 plus. 4 plus speed. Feels like a 6. It's actually really good. Cleaving potential being 4, which a lot of this gets somewhat mitigated by the perk tree, which we will go over here in a second. A little bit different playstyle from the other ones that I've tried. Especially with the tactical, I felt like the balance was a lot better, or fencing was a lot better with the tactical, or even the assault. It just felt right. You didn't necessarily need the speed. You already had that in your mobility. So for this, oh man, absolutely. If you have not tried it for a while and you've been listening to the rantings and ravings on the internet about how horrible the block function is, give it a shot. I think you'll be surprised. So, let's go into the perk tree for this one. So for this one, I actually went with the top tier, which, if you haven't seen this, this is primarily your stomp build, if you need to. Also, I went with the melee damage increase by 5% overall because it impacts both of these. I know most people try to just throw it into the Tyranids, so you get 10% here, 10% here, but this is actually giving me 15% for Chaos because I'm getting this. But we'll start with the first one. Armored Strength. When you have full armor, melee damage increases by 10%. Obviously, with this, if you're using the Gunstrike method of filling up your armor, I actually have armor full a lot of the time, so I'm constantly using this. As opposed to the melee damage increases by 5%, which if I wasn't getting all those gun strikes and replenishing my armor as much, I would probably just go with that. First one in Mastercrafted, Crushing Heal. Enemies hit by Stomp deal 30% less damage for 4 seconds. Cooldown is 10 seconds. The cooldown kind of sucks on that, but it just means that per fight, if you're fighting a large mass and they all get hit by your Stomp, which, by the way, in one of these here, the stomping effect ends up having a lot more range. Yeah, that's this one. An Artificer, Stomp area effective radius increases by 50%. Matching with this is tremendous. You're hitting everybody around you with this. So they deal 30% less damage for 4 seconds. I also believe that that is 30% less damage against anything that they attack. It's a debuff on the opponent. So that means that they are doing 30% less damage to everyone. Can't stress that enough. I've been trying to test this out and make sure that that's actually true. I'm pretty sure that is how that is working. And that is in contrast to Swift Recovery. Swift Recovery is heavy attacks restore 100% contested health, 100% more contested health. Applies to the following attacks: Quick Punch, Front Kick, Shoulder Bash, and Stomp. So those are your charge attacks in succession of light attacks with Chainsword. I traditionally have always used that one. I actually thought it was really good. I sometimes do miss it, especially when I'm trying to regain contested health, but your banner is primarily the main way you're regaining contested health. It kind of takes the place of that overall. And so the next two here, I basically just got both of them, which they're both Perpetual Strength, which they're both 5% damage increase for melee. So that's a total of 10%. First one, an Artificer, Reverberating Impact. Stomp area of effect radius increases by 50%. Obviously, that seemed tremendous, and it is. It's really nice. I actually really enjoyed the Stomp build with this melee class. It's been really fun. As I've said before, sometimes when you're a little bit more single target, the Stomp build isn't exactly what you need, but this is more AoE. You're causing a fair amount of damage and stunning everything. If you notice, if I'm doing a lot of the stomping around, it takes a fair amount of stomping around to actually down everything, and it takes even more to actually kill them. So you're doing it a lot. That's actually why with other classes, I don't really recommend the Stomp build, but for this one, keeping things off you and then switching over to the actual sword, it's great. Saw Blade, light combo length increases from 4 to 5 strikes. Again, my normal build on other classes includes that, and I really like that because your 3rd, 4th, and 5th strike are kind of AoE attacks out in front of you. Big sweeping hits. They're actually really nice. So it was what I used to go with, but the Stomp builds felt a lot better for this class. Now you have Chaos Slayer and Tyranid Slayer. This is 10% on whichever race that you want to increase your damage for. Next, in Artificer, hard target. While performing a light combo, you take 15% less range damage. It's actually a pretty good one. 15% is not a whole lot, but it is enough to warrant it being an honorable mention, put it that way. And this is in contrast to Menorah Slayer. Melee damage against Menorah level enemies increases by 20%. Almost seems a little overkill. It is kind of fun though. I've run that a lot in my other builds, and it's really nice to be able to just clear the smaller guys very quickly. But I think this class, the stomping aspect of it does this a lot better than just Menorah Slayer. First one in Relic, Trampling Stride. After performing a stomp, hold the attack button to perform an additional stomp. As you saw earlier, doing the double stomp, it's kind of fun. Sometimes it's not even needed, and sometimes it's actually a little bit of a detriment. If you're spinning up to do another animation of a stomp, you can actually get hit during this if something's coming in right after you do your first one. You have to just kind of time it right. Overall, it's really nice. It does a good job at like flattening everything out and trying to disperse enemies so that your team can have a moment, assess what they need to prioritize on, and then attack it. Full Throttle. Switches Punch with Full Throttle. Hold the attack button to prepare the attack. Damage increases by 100% per 1 second while preparing. And that's the one I primarily have been using with the Tactical class, where you actually rev up your Chainsword and do a large sweeping attack out in front of you. And the longer you hold it down, man, it does a lot of damage. And I've actually used it to kill a lot of enemies that are doing call-ins, because they're just standing there, so it gives you a second to throttled it up. Major Slayer. Melee damage against Majora's level enemies increases by 10%. Obviously, that's the highest of the lower level threats that you face most often, so I kind of felt like that was a really good one to have. Extremist Slayer, melee damage against extremist level enemies increases by 15%. This is one that I switch off depending on what I'm doing. I would say for the most part, if you're facing chaos, I would dump the one that I have selected here, Momentum Gain, and do this. Just because, I don't know, it feels like the Chaos Extremists are a little bit more prevalent. They're far more range-based, so you gotta get in and get them down because they're gonna kill you quick because you're not ranged-based. There's been a few times where I've switched that over if I'm gonna head into like Reliquary, so. And then there is Momentum Gain. Each consecutive light attack increases light attack melee damage by 3% up to 30% for 3 seconds. Since I don't do a whole ton of these, I really am only getting up to about like 3 or 4 attacks in, and that's it. So sometimes it's a little bit of a waste. Last but not least, Kill Streak. After killing 10 enemies in rapid succession with a light combo, you do not lose control upon taking heavy hits, and you cannot be knocked back for 5 seconds. Cooldown is 10 seconds. This one seemed like a little bit of a waste, but especially it being the last one in Relic, didn't seem like the best choice, so kind of avoided this one overall. Even in my other builds, that's where I came out on that one.
Assessing. You may try to farm out, but let's show you how we together, brothers, we must cast out the blasphemous sorcerer. Show the heretics our will is stronger.
Now for the only weapon this class has that is currently exclusive to it, the Power Sword. This weapon is very fun to use in general. It has 2 modes, speed and power, and a good amount of traversal built into several of the strikes to allow you to get around as you attack. There are 4 main choices for the final type of defense you want to choose for this weapon as well. 2 balanced versions, 1 block, and 1 fencing. Unlike the Chainsword, the block version is not the strongest. The fencing version feels like the most balanced version compared to the other 3, but either of the balanced versions feel good as well. The cleaving for the block version just didn't feel like it was enough of a trade-off for the lack of overall damage and diminished speed of the fencing variant. To cover this more in depth, let's look at the perk tree.
Pay no heed to its lurking shadow.
So as I said, I ended up going with the fencing version for this. Again, the balanced version for contrast, one of the balanced versions for contrast, the other balanced version, and the block. Obviously the block is close, but not quite. I didn't think the cleaving potential escalation was worth it in contrast, like I said. Either of the balanced versions are nice. In fact, there's one that does a little bit more damage at the cost of some of your speed. This one, it's okay. That's your choice, but you know. Again, I would probably go with the fencing. You get really good parry windows as well as strength and speed. So, overall, I went with the bottom tier for the most part. So we'll start with the first one, Armored Strength. When you have full armor, melee damage increases by 10%, similar to the Chainsword. I basically didn't go with this one just because I was mainly trying to focus on the bottom tier here, so I ended up going with the melee damage increases by 5%. Again, this whole tree is very reminiscent of the Chainsword, just a little bit different. Mastercrafted. Master of Offense. After switching sword combat style, you deal 20% more melee damage for 5 seconds. Cooldown is 10 seconds. This is also why you might see people walking around constantly, changing modes. That's when he puts his sword out to the side and you see it flash, changing from power to speed stance or speed to power. When you're changing the style, by the way, these are both after switching styles, you just get different effects. 20% more melee damage is really nice. I actually tried this whole top row up here and then tried to mix at one point. This was just the one I ended up with lately. This one thing I will say about the Power Sword is there's a lot of different opportunities here. I don't think that there's like a one way to go only with the Power Sword. It really is up to you and how you play. This is just kind of where I left off, honestly. So let's go Master of Defense. After switching sword combat style, you take 20% less range damage for 5 seconds. Cooldown is 10 seconds. The only oddity with that is, are you really changing your sword combat style in time to get shot? It's kind of a weird one. Like, you can plan on attacking with Master of Offense, but Master of Defense? Whether or not you're planning to get shot and you actually switch your mode just prior to that, it just doesn't seem like something you're going to really plan for. But it is plausible, I guess. Perpetual Strength. Melee damage is increased by 5%. just general 5%. Same thing as what's underneath it. So you can kind of get both of these if you want. Momentum gain. Each consecutive light attack increases light attack melee damage by 3%, up to 30% for 3 seconds. This exact perk is on the Chainsword. This one also, you're not going to be doing that many light attacks, but you can just sit there and chain light attacks very quickly, and it just goes forever. It's just constant swipes, especially if you're doing something like the speed style, the speed combat style. You can get 10 light attacks very quickly on something. So if the speed style is what you want to do, I highly encourage you to get momentum gain. And as you might see, the top row is more speed style, the bottom row is more power stance, and I absolutely loved the power stance, so that's kind of what I ended up going with. It's got a lot more cleaving potential across larger groups, and I was trying to pay attention to the amount of Minoris I was putting down, so that's kind of where I went with that. Tranquility. While in Power Whirl stance, you do not lose control upon taking heavy hits, and you cannot be knocked back. Again, that's kind of a bonus. I have been seeing a lot more in Lethal where the Majoris level enemies will sit there and stack up and do a series of hits, and if you don't block one, you don't get hit once, you get hit like 4 times, and you can be killed pretty easily. So if you are not paying attention. So that's kind of where perks like this come into play. But it hasn't been that effective. It's a little bit more rare where this really becomes that effective, but it's a nice one to have. First one in Artificer, Fencing Blade. Speed style combo length increases from 4 to 5 strikes. That's kind of nice. Their 5th strike is not that crazy of a strike. It's just kind of nice to have another one there. I think it is kind of a swipe that's more of a cone effect. You get a little bit more of a cleaving potential on that one. Slashing Blade, power style combo length increases from 3 to 4 strikes. Same thing, and again, it's just kind of a nice to have. I think that these two were a little bit more filler, both of these. Next one, an Artificer, Chaos Slayer or Tyrannid Slayer. It's 10% in whichever race you're planning on killing. Next one, hard target. While performing a light combo, you take 15% less ranged damage. That one's actually kind of nice because if you're sitting there doing light combos, really trying to kill everything in front of you, you are taking a little bit less ranged damage. However, I know that the AI in the game is actually programmed to stop shooting at you once you have between 3 and 5 enemies surrounding you. They will try to prioritize targets to something else. However, if you're the only thing worth targeting, they're still going to shoot you. I've had that happen a lot, so you have to think about that. Kill streak. After killing 10 enemies in rapid succession with a light combo, you do not lose control upon taking heavy hits, and you cannot be knocked back for 5 seconds. Cooldown is 10 seconds. Again, it's kind of the same thing as the one above here, but I think you're a lot more apt to do light combos, especially with everything else in this line, than you are to get the 10 enemies in rapid succession. But I've definitely gotten 10 enemies in rapid succession with the sword, especially with the power stance, and you're cleaving over a huge swath of Minoris. Yeah, you'll kill them all, pretty much. First one in Relic, Reeling Blow. Enemies hit by Power Rake deal 30% less damage for 4 seconds. Cooldown is 10 seconds. Power Rake is when you hold down your melee strike button after a weaker attack, just your click attack, and you actually like rake the sword against the ground, and it's a big kind of wheel hit. And if you can just chain those over and over and over, it's actually kind of nice. I tend to do that a lot when I'm trying to down a Majoris level enemy. So it's kind of nice if they get hit and I have to reprioritize because something else is going on, that thing is dealing 30% less damage on me for 4 seconds. Cutting Edge, Power Rake deals 50% more melee damage. I like that one a lot more because that is across the board. Like I said, I use Power Rake a lot. I think that one's a good one to have because it's 50% more melee damage every time you do it, period. That one's been one of my favorite ones. It's kind of one of the reasons I was like, yep, definitely going through the whole entire power line at the bottom here. Extremist Slayer. Melee damage against extremist level enemies increases by 15%. I kind of felt that was needed because my melee weapon is the primary way I'm downing those things. So, Majoris Slayer, melee damage against Majoris level enemies is increased by 10%. Obviously, that's a good one because Majoris is the highest of the low that you're going to see. Minor Slayer, melee damage against Minoris level enemies increases by 20%. I decided to throw that on there for the sword because it's really nice when you're just cleaving over top of a lot of them. You kill them very quickly. It also helps with Kill Streak. Combining Kill Streak with Minor Slayer kind of helps down that many at a time. So, added benefit there. Power Restoration. Power style attacks restore 100% more contested health. That also helps as well, especially when you're trying to throw your banner down and you're not in the position to do a counter or weapon execution, just start doing like your power rakes over and over, and it will replenish a lot of your contested health. So that's also kind of a trick I learned with this one. Terminus Slayer. Melee damage against Terminus level enemies increases by 20%. I actually didn't see that as one I was going to aim for. I could see going for that. It is 20%. It is rather significant, so I guess that's up to you. Speed Restoration. Speed style attacks restore 100% more contested health. Exact same thing. It's kind of interesting. These two tiers are basically built like, which style are you going to do? Speed or power? And it's just play into the one that you want the most, and then you have like 2 or 3 bleed over wherever you want to put them, and that's really how the sword ends up playing out. Last but not least, the Power Fist. The updates for this weapon as of the 6.0 patch really changed the way you approach using this weapon. There's a strange range attack ability to it now, which honestly just adds to the oddity of this weapon. I think it was fine the way it was. It just needed a little bit more speed to it, some added damage output, cut the charging times in half, and make it a little less clunky to utilize. The Cannon Punch still feels a little weak, even with the heavy armament perk. This weapon has now been changed to more of a dodge-happy, charge-attack, gunstrike primer. If this is the way you want to play, that's great. I wanted this to be more of a brawler, punch-everything-to-death type weapon, but that is not what this really ends up being. I do enjoy it, but you have to play a certain way with it. If you center on the incredible blast wave you can get on some charge attacks, you can cause massive damage to everything out in front of you. I was able to solo a Carnifex with this weapon, even though I'm not that good at using it. It just causes so much damage, and you don't have to close range. Like I said earlier, it seems like a very odd choice design-wise to make the punching weapon have a more ranged build, but whatever. To explore this, let's look at the perk tree. The version, again, that I went with was the one for fencing, mainly because it does a good amount of strength, but the speed is at a 6+. So in contrast to, say, the balance version, which is 2 off of that same speed, so it's a 4 now, and a mountain of strength, but still, a 10+ versus a solid 12. I wasn't seeing too much of a difference. And of course, the block one, unfortunately, all you're getting is cleaving potential out of that, so I didn't feel like it was a valid choice for what I was doing. Now, perk tree. And again, this is after the 6.0 update, which I've been really impressed with for the Fist. Overall, all 3 of these weapons have turned this class into an absolute beast. It's actually been very nice. I went back and played all of the classes, and then compared to this one, I've been very impressed with the Bulwark. So, changes to the Power Fist were one of those main reasons. So, let's just start with the first one, which I believe these are similar, almost the same. Armored Strength. When you have full armor, melee damage increases by 10%. Obviously a good one, especially when you're using a system of gun strikes to replenish your armor. You're going to have full armor a lot of the time, so it's a good one to have. And if you find yourself not really having a lot of armor all the time, this one probably would be your best runner-up. Melee damage increases by 5%. And it's across the board, has no prerequisites, so there you go. Starting into Mastercrafted. Swift Recovery, heavy attack, restore 100% contested health. Applies to the following attacks: thrust, jab, back fist, hammer hook, back fist 2, thrust, jab 2. Those are all your main charge attacks as you're chaining them. By the way, I have to say, you have to remember that those attacks, especially with one of the perks that I will get to here in a moment, the Tide of Battle, this one specifically, Swift Recovery, and anything else related to those charged attacks, you're getting a huge power wave out in front of your character that is obliterating multiple targets. Those damage ranges based on all of the targets hit are all calculated as a single strike in proportion to this perk, if that makes sense. Basically what I mean is all of that damage over all of the enemies you're hitting per hit is restoring 100% more contested health. If you have contested health, go ahead and do a charge attack on a group. You'll basically get everything back. Now to Heavy Preparation, heavy attack. Preparation time is reduced by 30%. Applies to the following attacks, it's the same ones. Thrust, jab, back fist, hammer hook, back fist 2, thrust, jab 2. Those are all your main heavy attacks with this. And cutting it in half, specifically for me, helped a lot, just because they do have a fairly aggressive charge time, and it's kind of nice to be able to just throw them out there almost as fast as your light attacks. So Perpetual Strength, melee damage increased by 5%, and again, these are the same. Perpetual Strength on both of these. You can decide to get both and get a total of 10 overall. Honestly, these just kind of end up being your stepping stone in whichever chain you're choosing here. Rally. When your health is below 30%, a successful Back Fist 2 or Thrust Jab 2 attack restores 1 armor segment. If you're kind of building your character out to basically be something that constantly is rebuilding your armor segments, I guess this is kind of a good one to have. I actually threw it on there for that reason. I'm constantly rebuilding my armor segments through gun strikes and rally, as well as executions. That seemed beneficial to me. In contrast to Focused Intention, when your health is below 30%, same prerequisite as the one below, you take 50% less health damage while preparing heavy attacks. Also, taken to contrast here, the caveat to this perk, which is while preparing heavy attacks, I almost feel like this one's kind of a no-go just for that. I really wish they would just take away the prerequisite of while preparing heavy attacks, because it sounds like a good one. While below 30%, you take 50% less health damage. That sounds awesome. Yeah, only while you're preparing heavy attacks. It's kind of a pain in the ass because it's only during a certain time where you may or may not get hit during that. It almost feels like throwaway because it just doesn't happen as often to make this as impactful as it could be. So it's another reason why I kind of skipped out on that. Now the next two are the ever-present Tyrannid Slayer or Chaos Slayer, where you get a bonus 10% damage increase on whichever one you're choosing. Whichever one you want, or get both like I did. And that's going to help you a lot. Now, combo. After successful heavy attack, your next light attack deals 10% more melee damage. It's 10% of a light attack. So you just get a minor boost to your light attack damage for a single hit. Maybe that's okay, especially if you're doing a light attack that maybe hits multiple guys, which especially for me where my cleave potential's a 2+, whatever. It doesn't really give you much, so One below it, Concussive Impact, Back Fist 2, and Thrust Jab 2, area of effect radius increases by 50%. That's rather significant, but it's only for those two strikes, which are kind of hard to get to given the position in the chain that they are in. So if you constantly find yourself doing those two attacks, of course, try to go for that one. Moving into Relic. Tide of Battle. Our wave forward distance increases from 4 to 8 meters. Applies to the following attacks: Thrust Jab, Back Fist, Hammer Hook, Back Fist 2, Thrust Jab 2. This one was significant to me, especially because they supposedly increased the damage levels and distance in front of you that is being done by those attacks. I started playing with this after I watched a guy do Termination on Absolute as a true solo, where you basically have no AI, it's just him. And all he did was those charged attacks. And it obliterated absolutely everything in front of him and killed everything. He made it look like a joke. So I was like, oh, I bet I could do that. And I did. It was a joke. It's actually hilarious how powerful the Power Fist can be when you just chain your power attacks, your heavy attacks, like this with Tide of Battle enabled so that your power wave forward is just obliterating everything. And then if you need some armor, start stacking some gun strikes and some executions, and you're good to go. It just becomes a joke. You're just kind of following a very, very, very simple pattern through the entire playthrough, and as long as you stick to that pattern, you're fine. It doesn't even matter what you come up against. Huge groups of majors, a collective of extremists or terminus, it doesn't matter. I have a gut feeling that they are likely going to patch that out, as they've already been talking about. So hey, if you want to go grab a lot of experience and some resources throughout the game, I would say do it now. Anyway, the one below that, Ground Shake. Switches Thrust Jab with Ground Shake. Slam the ground to deal area of effect damage in a 10-meter radius. I used to run this one a lot. The main caveat to it is it kind of takes a little bit to get going. I've actually had a bunch of the miners just run out of the way as I go up in the air and drop down and make a big smash into the ground in a 10-meter AoE blast. It takes a while to get going. It does an okay amount of damage. It's an okay attack. I would much rather have the Thrust Jab because it's nice and quick and just hits whatever in front of you in kind of a cone, and especially when you combine Thrust Jab with Tide of Battle, get out of here. I mean, you're crushing everything in front of you right away. See, the first one that they mentioned, Thrust Jab. Why would you throw this away just to replace it with something that does just a 10-meter radius of minor damage? It just didn't seem competent to switch these out. So this one definitely, with the 6.0 patch, just do that, please. Anyway, next, Majora's Slayer. It's a gimme. Melee damage against Majora's level enemies increased by 10%. Yeah, sure, yeah. It's the thing you're going to see the most of throughout the game. at basically any level except for maybe the very beginning. So now I personally, I did go with Menorah Slayer, even though there was a few other builds that I saw that just went on to Reeling Blow. I hate the miners. All the miner little enemies running around sometimes just piss me off. And if I combine Menorah Slayer with Tide of Battle, and I'm using all my charge attacks, especially now that my charge attacks, they take 30% less time to activate, yeah, I'm crushing groups of miners. Just get them out of there. I'm sick and tired of having to, waste a perfect parry or dodge or something like that on a miner. It's just, I need to be clearing the chaff out so I can concentrating on priority targets. I actually like getting that one just to help clear out the chaff, and I try to help the team out by just getting rid of the crap on the field so that we can start focusing on clearing the majors and especially the extremists and terminus enemies. So, Reeling Blow. Enemies hit by Cannon Punch deal 30% less damage for 4 seconds. Cooldown is 10 seconds. That's actually a decent cooldown. Cannon Punch, I absolutely used to run a Cannon Punch build pre 6.0 patch. It was actually kind of a fun build, even though it didn't do a whole hell of a lot of damage. It kind of mitigated range and some of the issues on the field. And I used to run this one, which it does 50% more damage, which if you don't know, Cannon Punch looks amazing, doesn't deal that much damage. So this just brings it up to the level of like a simple charged attack. So it sounds cool, it isn't. Back with Reeling Blow, 30% less damage for 4 seconds. That's overall. So anything you hit Cannon Punch with is now reduced in efficacy by 30%. Yeah. Especially if I hit a whole group with Cannon Punch and I'm kind of diving in, starting my chain of attacks with Cannon Punch if you're leading in. Definitely a valid one if that's the way you're going to go with it. So I absolutely see if you want to do Reeling Blow instead of Menorah Slayer because you don't give a shit about miners, go ahead. And the one I used to run, again, Heavy Armament Cannon Punch deals 50% more damage. And I've already talked about this, but yeah. It sounds amazing, but your Cannon Punch, while it looks like it's very impactful, it's a huge Superman punch. I really wish this did a train load of damage. It really doesn't, even at a base level. So adding 50% on there, it feels like your back fist 2 or your thrust jab 2 in proportion. It doesn't feel like it's doing enough to validate this. They need to bump up the base damage overall to make this a little bit more impactful. Your choice of ranged weapons for this class are fair, but much like the other classes, feels a little sparse. I felt like the heavy bolt pistol should be in here, and when the melta pistol gets added to the game, as they have promised, it should be in here as well. You currently only have 3 choices: the bolt pistol, plasma pistol, and the Neo Volkite Pistol. The bolt pistol is your weakest choice, but is still effective, while the plasma pistol really packs a punch over the other 2. The Volkite is now starting to feel a little better, as it obviously had some tuning to the heating rates I had mentioned in my other videos. I did several runs after the patch where I used it as much as I could, and yes, it still could use a little work, but it is totally a valid choice now. First and most simple choice, the bolt pistol. Again, as I have shown on other classes, this weapon can be devastating in the right hands. You concentrate on headshots, use it only when needed, and almost always ADS when using it. After the 6.0 patch, they have racked up the amount of spore mines everywhere, so please, if you take this thing, save it for when they flood the region with 1,000 of these things so you can pop them before they flood your team. This really becomes the main reason I have carried this the most. I still love the plasma pistol for popping Majoris Tyranid heads, but damn, do I hate those spore mines. Anyway, let's go through the perk tree for this guy. Again, the basic bolt pistol is not meant to be something you're going to take down a Carnifex with. This is what you're using to clear the Minoris level enemies like Termagants or any of those smaller Chaos miners. It's just meant to clear the chaff. You're not really trying to boost this thing up to have a lot more accuracy or even power. It doesn't need it. Basically, if you're hitting it in the head, it's going to die anyway. Just go ahead and get as much ammo as you can and utilize it for what it's good for. Honestly, it is funny sometimes when you look at what your choices are, you're like, why? Anything that's less ammo is pointless. Maybe accuracy if you really suck and you really need that additional accuracy. I actually don't think this is even going to help you. Pushing it to a 7 isn't going to save your life. It is what it is.
That's the way it is.
It's something that's got a lot of ammo. It's all you're going to need. I like that it's a nice, simple, basic thing, and it does come down to a skill issue if you're having a problem with this. It is a simple system. So, with that said, let's look at the perk tree yet again. This is my 5th time going through this guy, so, yeah. So, first one, Perpetual Precision. Maximum spread decreases by 10%. Again, I'll say it as I get into this entire thing, just go with the bottom line here. You need ammo. You don't need any of this shit up here. You're not trying to snipe with it. It's not that accurate. So even getting some of this headshot stuff, a headshot with more ammo is still a headshot. I one-shot the Ormagants all the time. Who cares? You don't need... This improvement is excess to the point of being frivolous, so you don't need it. But I will go through each one just to give an example. So again, first one, Perpetual Precision, maximum spread decreased by 10%. You don't need it. Great Might, damage increases by 10% against Terminus level enemies. Well, hey, if you're going to shoot at a Terminus level enemy, you might as well do a little bit more damage, right? Even though the damage that you're causing, even with a 10% bonus, is so minimal. Oh my god, what are you doing? Switch to your primary or your melee, for fuck's sake. Mastercrafted, Elusive Precision. After perfectly timed dodge, maximum spread decreases by 25% for 5 seconds. The last one, same thing. This doesn't need increased range mitigation, as in your spread, making you more accurate. It doesn't need it. Honestly, if you're not hitting it, shoot again. I hit the heads of many things with this at long range. It's not a problem. At the average engagement range that you're going to find yourself with this weapon, it is more than accurate for what it does. Especially when the alternative to this top row, which is all accuracy and some headshot damage, is things like Retaliation. After a perfectly timed dodge, you deal 25% more damage for 5 seconds. 25% more damage. Well, now we're talking. Now you actually get a reason to shoot with this thing at something bigger than the smallest enemy in the game, okay? Gunstrike Reload. After a gunstrike, the equipped secondary weapon instantly reloads. You're talking about speeding up the reload for the fastest reloading weapon in the game. Again, pointless. Iron Grip. After a gunstrike, recoil is reduced by 35% for 5 seconds. Also pointless, but hey, it's your stepping stone on where you gotta go. Into Artificer. Perpetual Precision. Maximum spread, yeah. Fuck it. Divine Might, damage increases by 10%. There you go. Why not? If you are going to shoot, you're probably going to hit what you're shooting at, unless you're really bad with this thing. You might as well do another 10% more damage, right? Headhunter. Headshots deal 10% more damage. Sure, it is to 10% more damage of headshot damage, so keep that in mind. If you do want to throw one in there, I totally understand. I did over here. It makes sense. Headshot damage. But maybe not this one, as you probably want to go through all the other damage ones and ammo, which is Extended Magazine. Magazine size increases by 15% of the maximum. Yeah, that seems logical. It's better to not have to reload, even though the reload is negligible. First step into Relic. Elite Hunter. After killing a Majoris level or higher enemy with a melee weapon, headshots deal 50% more damage for 5 seconds. I definitely can see that. I will tell you that if you're killing a Majoris level or higher enemy with a melee weapon, you're likely going to continue killing with a melee weapon with this class specifically. So why do I care that for 5 seconds I can deal 50% more headshot damage? I'm probably going to be swinging my sword anyway. It's a nice to have, but again, the majority of these things, for any class, much less the one where you don't have a primary, it's more important to be hitting more often than to have these once-in-a-while bonuses. So, Rapid Health. When your health is below 30%, killing 10 enemies in rapid succession restores health by 5% cooldown. There you go. Now we're talking. How about something that actually improves you? Killing 10 enemies in rapid succession. Definitely a possibility with this weapon, or even with really any of your weapons. And increasing your health by 5%. Now, the prerequisite for this, aside from the 30-second cooldown, which would whatever, your health has to be below 30%. So that kind of sucks. It's definitely going to happen. If my health is below 30%, I'm not concentrating on killing 10 enemies at a time. I'm concentrating on getting my banner down and doing an execution or a perfect parry in order to completely restore my health. And then I'll start fighting how I want to fight. So it's kind of a throwaway, but it's a nice to have. It's a once in a while. Headhunter. Headshots deal 10% more damage. Yeah, I definitely threw that in there. I had an extra point to spare after I got this entire column. Why not? Seemed like the best one out of the 3 that you can get. Like, who cares about the reload? And then these are the same. So you just pick one, right? Extended Magazine. Magazine size increases by 15% of the maximum. That's a repeat of this one. Yes, absolutely. Now we're at 30%. Sounds good. And then I'm going to cap it off with Divine Might. Get another 10% to stack on to this one. So now I have 20% increase. And of course, with that, you're talking about a 45% increase when I have after a perfect dodge. Now we're talking, if I'm going to use this thing and I want to have the most ammo, I want all of that ammo to doing the most damage. So that's what I got. Last but probably least, Hone Precision. Equipped weapons maximum spread decreases by 25% when firing without aiming. Oh my god. Why would I pick this entire row on the top to have less ammo, more accuracy, and less spread? Just to have be a weaker weapon that does basically the same thing. It doesn't need to be pinpoint. This isn't a rifle. Given your average engagement range with this weapon, there's kind of only one choice. The more and more that I've played with this with all of the classes, I've maxed out every weapon on every class. I would, you know what? I would love to hear anyone to come forward and say, no, this is the way to go, and then tell me why, because I just don't see it. Even after the 6.0 patch, I'm like, what? I understand coming up with a tree design-wise for a game. I really do, especially after 25 years of being in the industry. I'd really like to know what your thought process was about giving a throwaway tree. That's what I'm going to call it. That's what it looks like. So I'd really like to understand what the point of that is. Because in all reality, given what you're coming up against in this game, this bottom row with maybe one of the, with one of the headshot damage points is all you should be doing. I really invite anyone to come forward and say that that's going to be anything else but this. Maybe I can go down the road with this one and throw another firepower on there. You're throwing away a shit ton of ammo. I could see that. Maybe a little bit more firepower. I can see that argument. Not going to take it. Sticking with this. So I highly advise you do the same. Now for the weapon I really do love, the plasma pistol. This game gets as close as I have seen how this weapon is portrayed in the media, but it isn't as strong as it should be. I mean, if you were one-shotting everything with this, but you only had a couple shots, I don't think a lot of people would probably take it as often. Let's go through the perk tree for this guy.
While there is still time!
Now with the plasma pistol, you always want to take into account that this does an egregious amount of damage when you charge it. And really that's all you want to be doing, as every single shot of a low-level shot you take takes 1 energy. A charge shot, fully charged, that's the only way you actually get the damage output of a charged shot, is you gotta listen to it, hear the sound, know that you're fully charged. It uses 10 ammunition for your charge shot. That means if you use a light shot, a minor shot, it is using a single shot, a 10th of the ammunition, a 10th of the damage, basically. So I want you to think of it in that way. Light shots tend to basically be a waste of your time. I know sometimes people panic fire. I've done it too, where you're just trying to, you think you're so close to getting the enemy down, so you just start rapid firing. So things like trying to get a version that has higher rate of fire at the cost of your magazine is pointless. Don't do that. Having better venting speed at the cost of magazine capacity, I don't think is worth it either. I would be willing to hear someone out on that one if they think that that's worth it. I really doubt it. Getting as much ammo as you can in there. These all have the exact same firepower. You're not getting anything new, okay? So you might as well go with the one that absolutely has the most ammo. That's where I come out on that. By the way, building up to this, just always go with the one that has the max power, okay? Don't worry about... basically, you'll get here. Don't worry about it. Especially with the new way. I maxed out all of my weapons before they came in with the market where you can trade all this crap in and get golds for working your way through greens, for Christ's sake. No, I had to run golds to get golds. So anyway, let's start with the perks. Common cooling. Common shots generate 10% less heat. That sounds good. It's generating less heat, which means those common shots, which are the light shots, are not generating a lot of heat. Now again, I still stand by the idea that you should only be charge shotting this thing. So to me, that was absolutely pointless. I went with an overall fast venting, weapons cool, 15% faster. That way when I'm holding my gun and I'm not firing it and I'm waiting for the next time to do a charge shot, I might be doing 3, maybe 4 charge shots in a row. I need to make sure that thing is cold. When I bring that thing up, and I ADS and I punch out towards the target, I need it to be frozen. Absolutely, that was the first one and only one I would ever run out of these two. Rapid cooling, and this is the first one in Mastercrafted. After killing 10 enemies in rapid succession, weapons do not heat for 5 seconds. Cooldown is 30 seconds. Again, after killing 10 enemies in rapid succession, you have no heat for 5 seconds. Now, the one caveat to this one's really good for this class. I sometimes wish I could grab that because it's a no heat. If you could do charge shots with no heat mitigation just for even for 5 seconds, that's probably at least 2 if you're really lucky. Maybe you get off 3. That's fantastic because that's 3 with no heat, and then you get your 4 standard that I can usually get off in a full heat cycle of my pistol before it discharges. Yeah, that's a potential 6 to 7 shots that you can get out of that at max strength. That's fantastic. Rapid cooling would be a great one. However, it wasn't in the chain. I'm not going to get this because it's pointless, but it is a nice one. Point that out. Rampage. After killing 10 enemies in rapid succession, you deal 25% more damage for 5 seconds. Cooldown is 30 seconds. Obviously, you're dealing 25% more damage. So you're talking about if you're killing 10 and there's still more shit on the field, you need to clear that up as fast as possible. So tacking on another quarter of your damage potential for 5 seconds, that's another 2 charge shots I can probably get out at least at another 25% damage. Super critical, awesome, right in line here. Supercharged shot. Damage from a charge shot increases by 10%. Of course I'm going to get that. I am not even going to talk about why. Blast radius. Damage radius of charge shot increases by 5%. Yeah, I really do kind of wish I could get that. A lot of times when I first see a cluster of Tormagants, I will literally fire a charge shot as close to the center of the mass of those idiots as I can to kill as many as possible, because the charge shot blast will usually fry a bunch of them. I've gotten like 4 or 5 with a good placement on a charge shot. So I really like this perk. I do not blame you if you dump the only one here, Perpetual Velocity, for that. I totally understand. It is a good one. First one in Artificer, Blast Radius. Damage radius of charge shot increases by 5%. I don't know why they put this in there twice, probably just to mock me, but there it is. Let's go down to Great Might. Damage increases by 10% against Terminus level enemies. Now, Terminus level being the highest, you're going to need to be able to use your melee, your range, your equipment, everything you have in order to fight a Terminus level enemy. It's all going to meet that enemy. Terminus level enemies are the ones that are bosses, basically. I think of just basically the Hive Tyrant. When I think of a Terminus level enemy, something that high level is going to require everything. It's going to be a collaborative effort of your equipment and your team. So anything that can be Terminus, I've been starting to pour into, just because once you start running lethals and of course the new Absolute mode, you're going to need it. I always promote those now. I think that that's kind of shifted a little bit in the logic center with the new difficulty mode. Perpetual Velocity, shots charge 20% faster. A lot of times, like I said, I like getting about 4 to 5 charged shots out before I will just let my weapon overheat, because I need to get that many charged shots out in order to down priority targets immediately. If I see it at range, determine that it's a problem, put charged shots down that you know are going to down it immediately. I want to get them up and out as fast as possible. Charging them 20% faster seemed to be more critical to me than its actual impact spot being increased by 5%. But I do understand if you're finding yourself more or less shooting clusters of Tormagants or miners of some kind, I get it. It's just, this seemed more important to me. So, next, Plasma Collection. Energy reserve of plasma weapons increased by 20%. Absolutely. Do not skip that one. Or the next one. Again, charged shots from plasma weapon use 2 less energy. So I've always used this one. I guess I need to revise my earlier statement in saying that your charge shots should take 10 ammo. I use efficient charge absolutely every time, so it only takes 8. I think early on, for some reason, I thought these took 4 energy. Having poured, 550 hours into this? Yeah, I understand. It takes 10 energy to fire a charged shot. Ripping it down to 8 when you start with 144 rounds. That's 18 total charged shots you have in a full plasma pistol. So basically think that for every 5 every 5 charge shots you get a free charge shot. Kind of think of it that way. I think you'll feel better about using this weapon. Perpetual velocity, shots charge 20% faster. Yep, I really wish I could get both of those. I really do. I might end up being a little too cocky and a little bit too sporadic with my shots and charge it too fast and let it off the chain a little too fast. Having that charge kind of helps me be discerning in my shots, not gonna lie. First one in Relic, perfect radius. After a perfectly timed dodge, the damage radius of charged shot increases by 10% for 5 seconds. Kind of useless given the prerequisites and the cap on that, 5 seconds. Kind of stupid. So after a perfectly timed dodge, you gotta charge a charge shot, which means you're only gonna get one off, because you gotta complete your perfectly timed dodge, assess and acquire a target, charge while aiming, let it off the chain, make sure that you hit. All of that's gotta happen in 5 seconds, and you only get a damage radius on your impact spot increased by 10%. That seems pointless.
Bad fucking choice.
Low possibility thing to happen. I don't see it. So that one in and of itself is stupid. Retaliation. After a perfectly timed dodge, you deal 25% more damage for 5 seconds. Yeah, I love the simple, no caveats, no bullshit about that perk right there. After a perfectly timed dodge, you deal a quarter more damage for 5 seconds. I can get at least 2 charge shots off in 5 seconds. And if I'm dodging something, I'm probably going to do it point blank. But again, like I said earlier, on this one, you're looking to charge shot radius blast. You're hoping for the blast to be 10% for 5 seconds. Even if I'm able to get one off, I'm looking for clusters of targets. Why? Why would I care? I would much rather do a quarter more damage. Can you imagine if you got off 2 headshots that were charged shots in 5 seconds? Let's give it a best case scenario. Would you rather do a little bit 10% more on your damage radius or 25% more damage overall? Give me a break. Like, this just seems like a no-brainer. Again, this is similar to the bolt pistol where I'm like, this is the only thing you should be doing. I really don't get any of this shit up here. It doesn't make any sense to me. So, last 2. Charged cooling. Charged shots generate 10% less heat. Yeah, sure. That would be nice. Don't really care. It's better than the first one. They should switch those. Common shot. Why? If you're firing enough common shots that you're overheating your gun, what are you doing? Fast venting. Weapons cool 15% faster. Yeah. Combine that with the first one, which is the exact same one. My weapon cools 30% faster now. Why would you ever go down here and go for something that has that venting speed, you know? If I can just get all this ammo and then cap the venting speed here. Like, it just, the juggling of mitigating certain factors that interact with the game through this weapon, it just doesn't seem like there was a lot of thought put into the efficacy of the variations. These variations have great variation to them, but the validity of certain variations seems completely lost on me. Why would I get something with a lot of venting speed at a tremendous loss of capacity? Why would I increase my rate of fire when I'm using charge shots to cause maximum damage, only to lose ammo capacity? I have to say, more and more that I play this, I feel like some of these weapons, and I honestly think these 2 pistols, the first 2 here, kind of have the same issue. They need their perks reworked to have some validity to going a different direction. There are different directions. It doesn't mean both of them are good. So I can actually say, do exactly that. I generally don't say, this is the only path you should take. But with the bolt pistol and the with the charge shot, that's what I should call it. It's not a plasma pistol, it's a charge shot weapon. Yeah, I really have to say, that's what you should be doing. Finally, the Neil Volkite Pistol. This thing is still a glorified laser cat toy, but it has gotten better. I don't think that they corrected the damage rates, but it has felt better as far as how fast it heats up enemies and how long enemies hold their heat level. The shitty thing is, when this is your only way of affecting neurothropes and zoanthropes, it's bad. You can see the neurothrope's health not move as you hold the laser on it for 20 seconds, praying your teammates do more damage than you do. Again, this thing really only shines when you are taking out low-level threats. Spore mines and those little flying shits flying around on the circular saw blades, throwing exploding spears at you. Other than that, it kind of becomes a fallback with little use. Let's cover the perk tree on that.
Relay. Maintain box reports. Gamma clears out.
Now for the Neo Volkite Pistol. This will be a little bit different than the last 4 times I've reviewed this weapon, in that I think this is a little bit better after the 6.0 patch, and I do think that there is a small amount of validity to the different trees that you have a choice of choosing. I still, given the average engagement range and the amount of ammo available at higher levels, I still kind of feel I am forced. Maybe based on my playstyle, I'll take that. It's fine. You are going to need to stick to what gives you the most ammo, because if you don't, you're going to be on empty so damn fast. It doesn't matter how accurate you are when you don't have any ammunition. With the version, obviously, that has more ammo, especially when the alternative is a plus. It's not even a full damage. It's not a full DPS point up. It's a plus with a massive drop in ammo. Yeah, 650 might even seem like a lot, but as you hold down the trigger and see all that shit disappear, you're like, oh, okay. Yeah, it's going to take you about a full magazine just to drop a Majoris level enemy of a Tyranid. I've taken down many Chaos Marines quickly with this, and it felt like it did a good job. If you keep it right on their little bead, it's not always an option when you're getting shot at from other characters, though. So, let's get into this tree. Divine Might, damage increased by 10%. Yes, of course. I get it. This thing does a critically heinous amount of damage, as in not a lot, to begin with, so increasing the damage by 10%, oh man, I get it. That's a tempting one, trust me. Not as much as having 15% more to your maximum magazine size, given that having to stop firing this means your enemy is cooling down more. So I wanted to make sure that I have the opportunity to continue my shot. If I'm going to hold this laser on this guy's head for a long time, I want to make sure that I can hold it down for a little bit longer. That means having more ammo. So, first into Mastercrafted Gunstrike, reload. After a gunstrike, the equipped secondary weapon instantly reloads. Again, this is another one of those ones where I don't care because it does reload rather quickly. Not as fast as the bolt pistol, but, you know, it's pretty quick. It's not a big deal. So I kind of felt that that was kind of a waste of a perk in comparison to Combustive Momentum. After a gunstrike, heating speed increases by 30% for 2 seconds. 2 seconds may sound like nothing. It kind of is. They need to increase that to probably 10 seconds. But yeah, after a gunstrike, whatever you just shot is most likely dead with a gunstrike system. You're going to need to acquire a target ADS and start firing. And having at least for those 2 seconds, 30% heat speed increase is really significant, and I definitely have felt that. After, I probably can find a clip here of getting a gunstrike and immediately following it up with hitting another enemy and getting him down super fast. And you feel that 30% for that 2 seconds. It's actually quite nice. So I do like that one. Great Might, damage increases by 10% against Terminus level enemies. And I've said it before earlier with the Plasma Pistol, 10% is not a whole lot, but when it's Terminus level enemies, I will take any bonuses I can. I'm not totally shitting on the top line here. If you decide to do polar opposite of me or a mishmash of the two, I can see doing some of that based on your playstyle. Maybe you're a much better shot than I am and you can stay on the enemy's head a lot. I don't know. I'm constantly mitigating my foreground, background, and my equipment and my team. There's a lot to consider, and the terrain, of course. So there's a lot to consider in the kind of fog of war as you're playing around. So I don't know. I'll take anything I can get, especially in comparison to anything that's going to give me more ammo, like increased capacity. The maximum ammo reserve of this weapon increases by 20%. Obviously, that's a huge, huge bonus. Next one, Artificer. Volkite discharge area expands by 20%. The discharge area, I believe that is where it's making contact with the enemy, where your laser is making contact. Its discharge area expands by 20%. It's actually quite small to begin with, that's what she said. If you end up making it larger by 20%, it's actually not a whole lot. Kind of feels like a waste. I know it's a minor benefit, as some of these kind of are. It's kind of comparing minor benefits with great benefits at times, so not a great one. Volkite discharge area expands by 20%. So they just got the same one stacked on top of each other. You're going to get it regardless. Probably why it's such a minimal bonus. Anyway, heat retention. Heated enemies cool down 25% slower. I really like this one for the fact that if, for instance, a major jumps away or you end up having to perfect parry a target other than what you're shooting at, it's good to be able to handle that problem and then re-engage the original enemy with this weapon and continue heating them and keeping that heat up so that they take maximum damage. That's what you're doing. You're doing damage over time that increases the longer you have it on that target. target. If you have to step away for a second, handle something else, and come back, you want that. You don't want to have to lose ground that you already fought to gain. This takes 25% of that bullshit away, and to me it is one of the more critical ones. So accelerated combustion heating speed increases by 20%. These two together, if you are going to run this weapon, I see a lot of people run it. I fucking hate it, but I see a lot of people run it. If you're going to run it, please run these two. I don't care what line you choose. Please get those two. Those two together are fantastic. It changes it from a glorified cat toy, pet teasing laser, to something that can kill things. And being able to get your heat up 20% faster and making them cool down 25% slower so that when you do have to disengage for a moment, even if it's either you had to retarget or they got away from you for some reason, got around a corner of a wall, whatever, both of these are going to help a lot. First one in Relic, Volkite Discharge. After killing a Majoris level or higher enemy with a melee weapon, damage of Volkite Discharge increases by 30% for 10 seconds. 30%, pretty damn good. And 10 seconds, nothing to sneeze at. 10 seconds of that being engaged on an enemy is significant. I think I have used that before. I had to test that one out just to see how incredible that was. It's good, but you're missing out on so much when it comes to this line. I could totally see you getting this entire line, jumping up here and going for these two instead of these two. That's your choice. That is a great perk. I'm not gonna lie, it's fantastic. The one I went with, after killing Majoris level or higher enemy with a melee weapon, heating speed increases by 30% for only 2 seconds. I really like the 30% heating speed getting up there. The caveat to that is the 2-second mitigation on this perk. That really sucks. I'm not gonna lie. I wonder if they corrected that, because I think it was better than that before. 2 seconds really sucks. Totally don't blame you for jumping over to Volkite Discharge. I actually might jump up to these two right after this. Anyway, Volkite Blitz. Volkite Discharge damage increases by 25%. And discharge area increases by 25%. That is significant. Yep, I'm probably going to jump over to that as soon as I'm done here. I will do that as part of this walkthrough. Distributed Deflagration. Along with Volkite Explosion, 25% of the heat is also transferred to surrounding enemies. That sounds cool, and I definitely understand what you're trying to do there. Please understand that this does not say damage. This says 25% of the heat is transferred to surrounding enemies. What that means is when you change targets, assuming that you're going to continue with this weapon on your next target, it means you're going to have a quarter less amount of time that you're heating that target. That's all. You're getting there much faster for whatever it is you pick next. It's nice, but I honestly, the more I'm looking at this, for what your average engagement situation is going to be, that's cool, but you're not always running into enemies that are that close to each other. And I like that it says surrounding enemies. It doesn't say that, hey, this is only within like 10 feet. It could be, and it kind of feels like that's what you're end up, at least this is the build that I've run for the videos that I recorded just for this class in the last 2 weeks. What did I record? 32 videos? Oh, more than that, because I threw away 10. My first 10 were just kind of me understanding some stuff, and then I got desperately ill. And then the 6.0 patch came out, so I had to record a shit ton of videos late night when I can't sleep, get up for work. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is this. I think that's a better setup than what I had, and I'm willing to give that a shot. I believe that discharge is better. And I believe Volkite Blitz there is no caveat to that. There are no mitigating factors. I like that a lot. Damage increases by 25%, and the area is increased by 25%. That's important. These two end up being a great catalyst for the other things you've already chosen, specifically these two as well. The heat and the speed and the remaining heat for 25% longer. But again, I don't mind either of these trees. It's for however you play. I try to base it off of what I have seen in combat.
It's moving to intersect. Apply more pressure.
I do want to say here that the shield does technically represent a weapon, and it is one that you are always taking. Your shield bash can be modified through your character perk tree, but still doesn't do enough to be used more than a few times per round, and doesn't really do enough to be dumping perks into it. It is unfortunate that it got this treatment in the game. It doesn't seem to always work either. Many times I've tried to block incoming shots, it doesn't come up, so I resorted to dodging all the time, erasing the reason for even having the shield. If they would prioritize the function of the shield over the top of the other animations, that would really sell the viability of the shield. Currently, it is little more than an aesthetic nuance with some semi-trivial functionality. The class ability is a complicated and incredibly valuable piece of this class. I would argue that this is the most valuable class ability in the game because of how it can affect the team. You can actually heal your entire team in seconds, but you only unlock the ability in your third from last perk in your perk tree. This means you will not be able to use it until you are level 22. This is bullshit. You shouldn't have to max out a character to unlock the most pivotal piece of its utility and then get to experience it and learn how to use it properly. I will cover this more in depth later, but it feels they missed the mark a little on this. As for the class ability itself, you basically slam down a banner that has a radius of about 30-40 meters of effect around it that restores armor slowly to the whole team. The armor replenishment can be boosted as well through the rapid regeneration perk, which I also think should be inherent to the banner from the start. Another perk you can unlock at a very early stage is the ability to instantly resurrect a teammate with your banner. I do agree this one should be an unlock and is at a good level for its usage. You are sacrificing the usage of the banner for it, but if you play right, you can get some healing for you and both teammates along with the res. Now the healing aspect of the banner is done through giving you an entire bar of contested health. Most people heal by doing an execution or even a perfect parry event when the flag hits, turning the white contested health that has shown up into red actual health. You can also drop the banner and then kill things around you to regain health. Just generic melee attacks, or even ranged attacks. Any weapon kill will do it. As a heavy, I would use the heavy melta and just regain everything with a blast or two during the banner phase. Another way to do this exact same thing out of combat is to plant the banner and then use a medkit. This will make the medkit completely fill your health bar. I've tried to tell people to hold off on their medkit usage until I get to them and plant the banner, but so many people just pop it the second they pick up the kit. If you're with a Bulwark and you are injured, but you have a medkit, get them to plant the flag first before you heal, so you can get your entire health bar back instead of just a little blip of health from the kit. This leads me to the character perk tree. This is one I really take issue with. Much of what is in the character tree should be inherent and leads to very little variation from tree to tree, and there are some perks that feel pointless. Nothing covers the use of your melee weapon of choice. I'm using the same tired choice of non-finisher gun strikes for armor like the assault class, and the shield bash perk feels kind of like a waste. It felt like a stretch to try to make the shield matter, but it still doesn't hold a candle to your melee weapons themselves. There is some variation to explore, but some are locked in. Let's go through each one.
First, I want to say that the majority of these perks will fluctuate a little bit, with the main exception being that which is in gear. I really don't think, because of the general social dynamic of playing this game, that you're going to do anything else but this. The expectation is that when you hit the field as a Bulwark, that you're going to be doing some level of healing, and not just for yourself. So being able to res your teammates, heal yourself and others, and provide a massive boost to armor better than the very, very low level that the original class perk actually does, then you're going to have to do this. There's really no other way. So I think gear, I'll cover the items in there, but in all reality, I think that's the way you're always going to have to go in any kind of group dynamic. With that in mind, I'll cover these one at a time, and we'll go over some caveats to these. So first one, Conviction. When your armor is fully depleted, you take 25% less health damage for 10 seconds. I tend to go with this one, although, yeah, there is some fluctuation, and I'm going to go core, team, gear, signature, and top to bottom, because that's really what you're looking at as far as the trade-offs of which ones. But the reason I went with Conviction is you're always going to be refilling your armor. It's kind of one of your things. But if you are going to take some health damage, I would rather it be 25% less for that 10 seconds. I can consider that and make sure that within that 10 seconds, I am getting away from severe damage. And the next one down, Intimidating Aura. A perfectly timed parry deals area of effect damage with a 5-meter radius. Cooldown is 5 seconds. 5-meter radius is actually not as big as you think. You have to also remember that your character, in all reality, is 10 feet tall. It's a few meters. So when you look around and you realize, oh, no, that guy looks very close. He's not. So 5 meters is actually not that small. It's basically within your immediate vicinity. And that damage within that 5 meters is not really worth it. I mean, you're going to keep doing them. I don't think you're going to get a bundle of kills from doing perfect parry area effect damage. The AoE, for me, this just was not worth it, especially in contrast to the other ones you can pick. Next one, and last one in this column, Forward Momentum. After a shield bash, melee damage increases by 30% for 10 seconds. Now, I almost hardly do a shield bash. You can. It's kind of a gimmick without a whole lot of purpose, and a lot of the perks in this system are an attempt to give shield bash purpose, which is kind of sad. If you can force yourself to do shield bash over and over again, then this is probably one of the ones you might want to consider. Melee damage increasing for 10 seconds by 30% is pretty significant, especially when you are a melee class. I still do not agree that it is better than Conviction, but that's up for you to decide based on your playstyle. I can actually see these two being fairly handy. Intimidating Aura just doesn't seem to be that impactful in contrast, so that's why I usually don't use that one. Next column, Armor of Contempt. When you block a ranged attack, enemies within a 10-meter radius take the damage instead. Again, there's a lot of times when ranged attacks are just, I'm usually being shot at when there's also an absence of enemies right around me, because the game is actually programmed to stop shooting at you with ranged weapons when you're encircled by 3 or more enemies. So even if with that in mind, that perk is somewhat useless. And I really don't think that the range damage being reflected is a reflection of how it would affect your health. So I kind of despise that perk for that reason. Next one down, Shock and Awe. Enemies in shock area take 25% more damage. Now this is one of the first ones that you're getting for your shock build if that's the way you want to build your Bulwark. I tend to not use the shock build because it can, honestly, seeing shock on the ground, sometimes it actually hurts your teammates and yourself, and sometimes I can't really tell like which one am I looking at. It's just an effect. The effect is the effect. You're guessing it, which is this going to hurt me or not. Sometimes I walk through it and I'm fine, sometimes I walk through it and I'm losing armor all of a sudden, or health. So I tend to not go with the shock build, especially in contrast to the other perks which actually benefit the team. Scrambled Targeting. If you are surrounded by 5 or more enemies, you take 25% less damage from ranged attacks. Now again, like I said, the game will try to target someone else if you are surrounded by melee attackers, 3 or more melee attackers. However, the caveat to that has to be that if you are surrounded by melee attackers and there are ranged attackers that can only see you, they are not going to reposition to shoot your teammates. They are going to now only shoot at you. So yes, there have been numerous times where armed termagants are shooting at me with rifles, along with Majoris level enemies who are just opening up on me for whatever reason. Either my teammates are dead, which has definitely happened, or they are not in line of sight. That's a good one. I kind of scramble between the top one and the bottom one. It's just that I actually tend to not use block, because when you use block, you become stationary. When you're blocking with your shield, that is. So I tend to not use the shield like that. I tend to dodge, because it also scrambles the AI's ability to target you, to shoot at you at all. It just becomes a gimmick that ends up being counterproductive to your overall combat ability. So that's another reason I don't use that one. Shock and Awe. Yeah, I can see this. 25% more damage to your shock grenades and also your shock abilities that drop on you, which will be part of perks I'll cover soon. I can definitely see that. It's just not something that happens enough for me, so I went with this one. I actually kind of feel like this column needs some help. So onto the last column. For core, Defensive Advantage. A perfectly timed parry or block creates a shock area for 5 seconds. Cooldown is 30 seconds. Now again, I would say if you're a shock build person, you're going to get this one and this one, obviously, because when you're making those parries and blocks, it's dropping a shock area. It's basically like dropping a shock grenade right at your feet. The cooldown kind of sucks. I kind of wish it was 20, just to pull another 10 seconds off of that. Stacking some of these, like Intimidating Aura, on top of defensive advantage might be kind of nice because you're causing damage with both. Stacking them, you end up getting a fair amount of damage, so I can definitely see that. Again, there is some fluctuation with core. I actually really, the core ones, I can see certain things. I just don't think that enough of them are viable enough to compare to each other. You definitely have one that, at least for my playstyle, definitely seems like to be a better option. Second one in this final column, Steel Within. When your health is less than 50%, you take 30% less health damage. That is one I've been running quite a bit. Can't say that's not a worthwhile perk, it definitely is. It's a good one. I just ended up going to the one below it because it helps a lot with your armor. It's kind of where you start looking at what's more impactful for you. Are you losing your armor immediately? All of it? Well, maybe you're allowing certain things to hit you a little too often. Then I would stick with things like health. Like these two right here are a lot more impactful to your health, as is the next one in team here that I definitely use. So I can definitely see this if you're not good at rebuilding your armor as fast as I do normally. Yeah, I can definitely see Steel Within being a good perk. Now the one I do use, Armor Reinforcement, non-finisher gun strikes restore 1 armor segment. And especially since you normally have, 3 segments, or 4 if you end up getting your armor pickups, which armor pickups are not restorable, but anyway. Armor Reinforcement. Being able to re-up a full armor segment with a non-finisher gun strike. I commonly use a Whirl Slash or a dodge and or dash attack to knock down and initiate a non-finisher gun strike on so many enemies. It is super easy to just literally max out your armor, fight how you want to fight, do 3 little Whirl Slashes, do 3 non-finisher gun strikes, and completely fill your armor. It's literally a simple gimmick. If you play that way, I can guarantee you to do pretty damn well. And as long as you have this perk, it makes it super easy. Now on to team. I'm going to look at these 3 in team here. Focused Restoration. Every 40 seconds, all squad members automatically restore 1 armor segment. I definitely see the viability in that. It is 40 seconds. It feels like a long time at times, but 1 armor segment for the entire squad. That can be very beneficial. I do like that perk. I just don't see it being viable in contrast to the next one, which is Advanced Conditioning. Contested health fades 50% more slowly for all squad members. Especially since there's been a lot of complaints about contested health going down way too quickly. At least this counteracts that issue to a degree. It's enough that I think it really does help. Especially when you're using your banner. If you're a banner healer like I do, I think it's a little bit better to be running this so that you have more of a moment and a longer period of time to try to regain all of that health. So again, I think if you're doing banner healing, which I hope most people who are playing a Bulwark actually consider doing, then I really think this is the one you're going to be taking. Effective Formation. All squad members take 20% less health damage from Extremis and Terminus level enemies. I can definitely see the viability for this, especially if you're doing higher level missions like the Lethal and Absolute. I think that that's going to help you a lot. However, again, it's just overall, it's only Extremis and Terminus level enemies. It kind of ends up being a little bit too niche in comparison to Advanced Conditioning, so that's why I stick with that one. Okay, now we're finally to gear. This is the one where I would definitely say, even the majority of people I've seen on YouTube and on Twitch that still play this game, that this is the 3 that you're going to go with. Rapid Regeneration, Invigorating Icon, and Rejuvenating Effect. Although I've heard that in the 6.0 patch, they're saying the 100% slower is bugged and that it's actually functioning exactly like it did before the 6.0 patch, and they're going to fix that in the next patch, not in the shadow patch that's coming in the next few days. You still have some time. It basically works as intended, in my personal opinion. Rejuvenating Effect, when the banner is active, it revives incapacitated squad members with its area of effect. I agree, this is not necessarily an absolute must-have, but considering how the game works, I do think it is the best choice in this line. So now I'm going to go through all of them. Purity of Purpose. The banner deals damage over time to enemies with its area of effect. It's not enough damage to matter. This is reducing out the one below it that I just covered. I don't think this is viable. Obviously, Rapid Regeneration. The banner restores armor 300% faster, but its duration is reduced by 10 seconds. 10 seconds sucks, but the 300% faster is incredible. I can't see it not being used with this. Again, I think it's mandatory. Focus strength. Shield bash knocks enemies back and makes them lose control for a longer period of time. I actually don't think it makes them lose enough control. Again, it's a shield bash thing. I think that they're trying to force these kinds of things in to make the shield not a gimmick. I still think it is, and especially in contrast to these other things, like rapid regeneration, it's kind of a joke, which is why I do not choose this. Next column, concussive force. Shield bash deals 200% more damage. Wow, they're really trying to push that. So again, if you can force yourself to use shield bash, then that's the one you pick. I'll put it that way. It's not something I do enough. It makes you face one direction and become planted to the ground while you do it. To me, it makes you a target. I just can't, as far as combat and how it functions in the game, this is just not viable in contrast to other methods of combat in the game. So again, it's neat, it works in theory. I just don't see this being as impactful as the other ones. Glory Shield. All squad members within the banner's area of effect take 20% less ranged damage, and the banner lasts 20% longer. The 20% longer is pretty cool. Actually, if you combine the idea with that being 20% longer with some of the other perks in here, I think that's pretty fantastic. But all squad members within the banner's area of effect take 20% less ranged damage. So you, A, have to know you're being shot at. B, choose a point of domination in a room, plant the banner at it, and then everyone has to stay there within the banner's range. That seems illogical, given the fact that you are a melee fighter. What are you going to do? Close distance on a ranged fighter, plant the flag near him, now you're not taking range damage, but you can affect... the logic puzzle on this makes this a non-starter. You should be... you can affect range, obviously you have a gun. If you're lucky enough to have enough ammo for it, I can't tell you how often I'm out of ammo, most of the time, to be quite honest. Especially if we're facing anything that's a Neurothrope, Zoanthrope, or any one of the Chaos enemies that happens to fly. I'm constantly running low on ammo even when I absolutely prioritize it. You can make an argument between these two of which one's better. You're never beating that. You're just not beating. I think this is Invigorating Icon. This is the one. This is the one you're supposed to take. In the social setting of this game and how you play in a team, fuck the team. What if you want to just save yourself? Go ahead, be a psychotic narcissist. You have every right. No one's gonna, unless people are smart enough to actually kick you from the game for constantly only healing yourself, which, again, that's another problem. Invigorating Icon. When the banner is activated, all squad members regain maximum contested health, but it recharges 100% slower. Right now, it's in the blink of an eye. You regain all health. Also understand that Invigorating Icon, you can plant your banner and use a med kit, and it will completely fill an almost entirely empty health bar to maximum. I don't care what Glory Shield and Concussive Force are like. I don't care if either of these are any good. This is the one you have to use. Okay, so Rejuvenating Effect. When the banner is activated, it revives incapacitated squad members within its area of effect. I do like this one because I have been absolutely like 2 to 3 times a day. Been the last one left alive and had to res teammates that are down. If you're the last one left alive, you're the only target being shot at. So you are going to need to res someone quickly. You don't have the time to sit there and do the 5 to 7 second kneel down, pick the guy up routine. No, you walk up, slam the flag, and you're up shooting again, and so are they. By the way, they're up shooting, so are you, and you guys are full contested health, which means you're now regaining health, both of you. I think I have one clip here I can show where I slammed a flag down, rezzed a guy, and I got both of us to full health immediately. Earlier when I said these are the skills you're going to have to use, it kind of sucks because I wish that they had ones that were similar to these. Just iterations on a theme is fine, but I need better choices here because, in my personal opinion, these are the 3. But moving on. Merciless Resolve. After a shield bash, melee damage increases by 15%. You do not lose control upon taking heavy hits, and you cannot be knocked back for 10 seconds. That's a bunch of bullshit. First, shield bash, 15% for melee damage for 10 seconds. I think I have skills on some of my weapons that would outshine this.
I haven't got time for this Mickey Mouse bullshit!
Tactically, Rejuvenating Effect wins. I'm just not going to do this. It's not enough to pull me away. Inspiration. All squad members within the banner's area of effect deal 20% more damage. This one actually has a chance at being effective, especially, I will say, if you're in tight quarters, that can be absolutely substantially necessary. Boosting everybody by 20%, oh, it's great. I could see Inspiration being worth it, but taking away the ability to insta-res teammates, again, tactically doesn't make sense. I don't care. I will just shoot 2 more times. Doesn't matter. I will swing my Chainsword 2, maybe 1 more times. It doesn't matter. That's core. Last one, for signature, we're going to start at the top, emergency countermeasure. When your armor is fully depleted, a reserve shock grenade automatically detonates at your position. Cooldown is 120 seconds. This is very similar to both intimidating aura and defensive advantage. These kind of are the same thing. Again, this is the next one in your shock class if this is what you choose to do. Again, though, I cannot stress that taking the shock setup like that is going to detract from a series of other things that you may want to do, especially when it comes to the team dynamic and getting out of there alive with everybody. So that is your choice, though. Defensive Mastery. A perfectly timed parry or block instantly incapacitates a Majoris or Extremis level enemy. Cooldown is 120 seconds. That's definitely been the one I've been going with, especially for Extremis. Being able to very quickly take that down has been fantastic. If I hear the little chime that you tend to hear when you know that an Extremis or Terminus level enemy is about to enter the field, I usually try to make sure I stop with the parries or blocks and just go ahead and start dodging out of the way as much as possible instead of doing the parry, so I can save defensive mastery for a high priority target. Again, tactically use this, it's very, very effective. And the last one, Armored Advance. If you have armor remaining, you do not lose control upon taking heavy hits and you cannot be knocked back. It's a fun little nice to have type perk. It's just not one that I feel like competes with even the top 2 here. Pushing emergency countermeasure into a shock build is far more advantageous than trying to throw that on top of a shock build or even the build that I'm showing. I just don't see it. It's also contingent on your armor, and it only gets you immunity to heavy hits and can't be knocked back. You know, I mean, I can see pairing that with armor reinforcement, but again, it's just not as viable as some of the other choices here. And that is kind of the overall perk tree. I do want to just say that what you start with, Chapter Banner, it's your special ability. A placed banner restores armor to all squad members in the area of effect. Your starting perk is health increases by 20%. Again, just saying all of this, you obviously can do whatever the hell you want. It's a perk tree. You can mix and match. I have tried, I think, almost all of these. I definitely, obviously, have unlocked all of them. I've messed around with several different builds. I didn't like the shock build because I felt like I was missing out on certain things that I did do a lot, just naturally the way I play. But the shock build has some viability. If you can force yourself to shield bash, you're forcing yourself to do a subpar combat tactic. It's not giving you as much damage as you think, even if you're going to go with the 200% more damage. There's viability in it. I'm sure you can make it work. It's just considering the fact that you're holding another weapon in your other hand, a power fist, a chainsword, or a power sword, I would go with that. Even with 200% more damage on your shield bash, I don't see it. You might be helping by stunning and knocking down all the enemies so that your teammates can do that, but how is that any different than just causing straight high-level damage and your teammates also causing that level of damage and still maintaining the ability to heal, res, and regenerate armor for everyone? It just doesn't, the comparisons aren't there. So I still think so far this has been the build I've seen. I've seen plenty of builds on the internet that are basically an iteration on this theme. I would say everything from team to signature has been almost identical to other builds I've seen. I've seen a lot of people mess around with stuff in core. I see a lot of people using intimidating aura and defensive advantage in tandem with emergency countermeasure. Sure, I've seen a lot. Like I said, the shock build is semi-viable. It's just I've seen this work a lot better.
The class's team dynamic should be obvious at this point. You fill a very specific role in the game currently. Once they add the new class later this year, maybe this will change, but you are basically the medic/tank. The social expectation of the class you play is kind of what has dictated the character perk tree. You might deal a lot of damage with a shock build or have fun with the shield bash build, but you won't be helping the team out in the ways that they expect you to. Please fill the role that benefits the team. Nobody signed up for your TED Talk, you are not actually the main character of the story, and unless you are some savant at playing the class, you likely are not getting through all of this alone while your teammates are supposedly outshined by your greatness. Here are some pros and cons. I'll start with the cons, per tradition. First con has to be how ineffective you are when ranged enemies are present. You don't have a primary firearm, and the secondaries you do have are either weak or low ammo, or both. This does suck, and I have had to take down Neurothropes and Zoanthropes alone before, and it really sucked. Once you're out of ammo, you can get them to kind of get close to the ground by moving around and making them chase you a bit, so you can get some melee strikes in, but it becomes painful and time-consuming.
I wonder what implosion looks like from an aerial viewpoint.
Con number 2, being the only class that has access to the Power Sword, and it sucks. The Power Sword is still usable, and I completed many, many lethal runs with it, but it just doesn't have the damage output the Chainsword has. I went with a blocking Chainsword, and it felt like it was a far better option than the sword itself, which should not be the case. Canonically, this weapon should be doing way more damage and honestly be usable by multiple classes. Con number 3. The shield is pointless. You might be running a shield bash specific build and totally disagree with me, but
Shut the fuck up. You're wrong. Okay? Okay.
this thing does not enter into the battle as much as it should. It tends to feel more like you are just the tactical class with no primary weapon, and only you can see this giant plate on your left hand. Again, this could have been handled differently, and maybe the shield would be more than a prop, but it kinda sucks right now.
Fuel controls reset.
The pros, or pro, and yes, there's only one, which is kind of sad. Maybe that should be my other con. Anyway, the main pro for this entire class has to be the banner, your class ability. It is a hell of a pro. I could say that having access to the power sword is a pro, using the shield is a pro, or even that you just have cool looking armor, but that's all superficial and untrue. The only real big plus for this class is the banner. It's a big plus though. The banner is a huge piece of tactical strategy for you and your team. As a class ability, it affects everything and can swing a battle from a loss to an overwhelming victory. It is quite the pro, and honestly should outshine anything I could have put here, so. My overall impression of the class is that while it seems a little unfinished, this is a very fun class and was super fun to max out and then play at a maxed out level. I was a little disappointed by the character perk tree, lack of shield usage, and yet another class missing the heavy bolter, but I thoroughly enjoyed the class. I absolutely do not recommend this class for beginners, not because I don't think you can't learn it, but because the team-centric nature of this class is so lost on the general public that most of the Bulwark players I come across are nothing but fail piles swinging a fail sword with their fail banners flying high over their failure. In other words, they only heal themselves while they're constantly hurt through lazy playing. For this reason, I think you need to be a little bit more experienced before you just jump in on this class. Know the classes you are healing as well, and what they play like before you jump into this one. What I would like to see in this class to make it better should be obvious at this point. Make the healing aspect of the banner inherent to the class at level 1. Rework the usability of the shield so it has more purpose. Give us some perks that make the sword more damaging. Add the heavy bolt pistol into the lineup, and add a shield charge attack like so many other games have done. I was hoping that would be a thing with this class, and was disappointed it wasn't there. I was looking forward to charging at a group of enemies with my shield up, knocking them all over, and then starting my sword attacks from within the group of staggered idiots. This gives you a way to close distance with groups instead of dodging, rolling all over the place to close distance to enemies who are shooting at you. That might be a little too World of Warcraft for some, but I thought it was a no-brainer for this class. Anyway, just a bit of dreaming. All that being said, I do really enjoy the class, and have been impressed with how easy it is to fight using this class. It was not what I expected. Well, I hope you learned something from this overview, and if you have any contrasting thoughts or play styles with this class, drop a comment and let me know. Thanks, and I look forward to seeing you out there.
Finish him, Justin.